Gonna throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, as always, with you, Anthony Pagnotta. And alongside me today, Zack Hubbard, which means it is time for another recruiting edition of the podcast. And this time, hey, man, the Tar Heels, they've turned the page on the 2025 class. In case you missed it, they did land a long snapper in the class. We are not going to break that down. They are, he is a guy that basically in any other year would have been a walk-on in Jacob Tannenbaum. The most significant thing about him is that he is related to Mike Tannenbaum. That's the thing that probably sticks out the most, the former Jets general manager. And so now they have officially turned the page to the 2026 class. And so we have done the exact same. So we're going to tell you where things stand right now for Carolina in that class. 6 commitments. We'll talk about each of them. One guy that was a holdover from Mac Brown that we won't talk about nearly as much as the other guys, but definitely going to get into the guys that have committed. And then the top 10 guys that we want in this class. We do it every single year, our most wanted. And this year we have that latest installment for you. And boy, for me, it contains, some in-state guys that are incredibly talented, some out-of-state guys that are incredibly talented. This one, probably the most wide-ranging that it has been in a long, long time with Bill Belichick as the head coach of the Tar Heels now. So all of that, as well as some news and notes from the recruiting trail as well that we will get to here on this edition of the podcast. And so really, I think you just to start off, the best way to do it is to just ask simply, what do you think about the start, Zack, for the Tar Heels in this 2026 class? You know, Bill Belichick came in and it seemed like this was where his immediate focus went. Yes, I think there was a little bit of, of the focus put on the 2025 class, but I think he knew that he was kind of limited there. Immediately, he comes in, starts meeting with some of the top in-state guys in the 2026 class, then goes out on the road and is offering a lot of these 2026 guys. And as we sit here now with 6 commitments already in this class, 5 of them by way of him and his staff, what do you think about how quickly they've worked here in the 2026 cycle?
I think they're to about as good of a start as they could have given the time frame and given what's still left to be done. I mean, we've heard reports of guys that they're hiring in staff roles, but we don't have anything officially confirmed in terms of contracts or things like that. We have some best guesses, but there's still a lot of time that a lot of these guys in the 2026 class have to get to know this staff, have to meet with them, have to get on campus in the spring and into the summer. So, that's something that will continue to happen, but I think that they've already made great strides in this class. They started with a quarterback, Zayd Lott, that's a holdover from Mac Brown's tenure, but then have added 2 offensive players, a running back in Crew Davis, an offensive lineman in Zion Smith, and then with the addition of the new defensive back coach, they've been able to sort of reach into California as well. They've already gotten several commits from defensive backs in that area where Armando Hankins was obviously coached at Washington, but sort of in that West Coast recruiting area that, North Carolina has really not had a ton of impact in. So there's already more of a national emphasis, or just not necessarily specifically national, but just that this staff comes from all over. They have different backgrounds. They have different experiences in different areas, and they're sort of using that experience and using that expertise in this class to go beyond sort of the traditional stomping grounds that we are comfortable and sort of know of for North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. They're going beyond that to whether it be, the West, the Midwest, or the Northeast.
Yeah, I think, you look at a lot of the areas where some of the offers have been handed out. Of course, he's gone to the Northeast. That's where he's, familiar with that territory. I think he likes a lot of the guys up there as well. I mean, we saw, some of the guys that he was pulling from. I mean, rarely do you see Carolina ever go into New York City and find guys. But they found one in the 2025 class. They've offered a guy in the 2026 class at running back. So it's clear that they are really looking to sort of span the nation and go after some of these big names. I mean, there's some guys we'll tell you about later that are out-of-state recruits that are, Carolina is currently in the middle of the battle for. So I do think that has become a focus, is turning this into a national program. When we heard from Mike Lombardi, the GM, last week, he said that is one of the things that they're trying to do, is the brand is big enough, and they want to make sure that people know that North Carolina is not just a local brand, but a national brand. I think that's definitely something you like to see, but I do think that there is an element of taking care of your home state, especially when Carolina's been at its most successful. It's been when they've recruited in the home state. But to be able to go out to the state of California and get guys, that's huge. Maybe getting a pipeline into the state of Texas, that would be massive. Florida, Georgia, those are areas that you've started to hit, but under Bill Belichick and his staff, maybe it gets to another level that it hasn't been at before. And that could allow you to really get the type of talent that allows you to not only compete year in and year out in the ACC, but compete to get to the college football playoff, which I think is the ultimate goal of this staff. So let's talk a little bit about the guys that were added from the West Coast, because those are the 3 highest rated prospects right now for Carolina. You've got 3-star athlete Jaden Jefferson, 3-star cornerback Marcellus Ryan, and 3-star cornerback Justin Lewis. All of these guys, in my opinion, are guys that are built to play on the defensive side of the ball. Now, with Jaden Jefferson, I mean, you can kind of play him anywhere. I think the fact that he runs a 10.4 100-meter dash and a 21.12 200-meter dash. I think that certainly is going to have some people wondering why you wouldn't want to put him out there as a wide receiver. But when I watched his film, really liked what he showed, especially as a press man corner. I think that's one of the things you notice about all of these guys, is that they are guys who play up close to the line of scrimmage. They want to get their hands on the opposing receiver. Clearly having played the offensive side of the ball, love his ball skills, and definitely think he does a good job of sort of picking his times when he's going to play the football and when he's going to play the receiver. Very fluid hips, especially for a guy at his level, which allows him to easily open up and stay with receivers. And he has the speed where if he does get beat, he's able to recover. Like him as a tackler as well. And I think that's probably the main thing that you want to see from a guy that's probably going to have to play nickel corner. When you're 5'9", 155 pounds, it's going to be hard to put you on the outside. So the fact that he is an aggressive tackler, he is someone that can lay the wood when he gets to the ball carrier. I think those are all things that you like to see from a guy if they're going to play that slot corner spot. And of course, coming from the state of California, love the level of his competition. When you move to Marcellus Ryan, I think he's one of those guys that even at 5'10", I think he's very similar to what we saw from Elijah Huzzy, can play on the outside because he can really thrive in just about any situation. He played both man and zone at the school that he was at. He has good speed, which allows him to stick with just about any receiver one-on-one and also break on the football when he's in some of those zone coverages. Again, fluid hips for him as well, especially for a guy that is only a high school junior. And you love the way that he's able to shift his weight and put himself in position to make plays. That's very key when you're playing in a zone defense. Willing run defender and a strong tackler. Again, things you like to see, especially if you're going to have guys on the outside that are going to be fighting off of those blocks. But I love the versatility that he brings. He could be a guy that could play in the slot, doesn't do a lot of it at the high school level, but with his size could fit there, but could also be a guy that thrives on the outside. And, even though he's a guy that doesn't have a lot of interceptions, he's definitely a guy who consistently can make plays on the football. Then you move to Justin Lewis. This is your bigger corner. This is your 6'2", 165-pound guy. Definitely fits as an outside corner. Love the physicality with him. That was the thing that really stood out, is that he gets his hands on just about every receiver off the line of scrimmage. And when he tackles, he hits with a purpose. So, this is a guy that plays with a lot of physicality. It's exactly what Carolina was looking for. You could see it in a lot of the guys that we watched tape on towards the end when Carolina was landing guys in that 2025 class. Love his straight line speed, which allows him to stick with guys down the field and run down big plays if they happen. You see that constantly on film for him, a guy with really good motor. Another thing that Carolina's really been looking for here under Bill Belichick. His ability to play the football, very strong. And with more playing time, the interception numbers should be able to go up. Biggest question mark with him is why he didn't play more than he did, which is, what we saw from him was extremely promising. So, look, I like all three of these guys. I think they all bring a little bit of a different skill set. And basically, as I said there, with Ryan being able to play on the outside, I think this could be maybe the future of your room. So you've got some nice balance across the landscape of your cornerback room here. And that's why I think all three of these additions, if Carolina can hold on to them, that's going to be the big thing. Yes, they landed them, but there's going to be teams closer to home that are going to be coming hard after them, you would imagine, as this process goes along. But as of right now, Carolina with three really solid additions out of the state of California.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, these are additions that sort of complement one another in what you'd look for as the basis of what's likely your future corner or nickelback room, whatever sort of distribution of that, or whatever terminology they use for a fifth defensive back and what they want there. This looks like that they're going to more of that of, instead of your nickel being more of a safety type, being more of a corner type that, is a plus tackling or has that speed to recover, which, a guy like Jaden Jefferson with that speed, even though he doesn't have necessarily the height that you look for in an outside corner, you put him on the inside, you work on that tackling, and with that speed, he has more sort of room for error in terms of, correcting mistakes and getting to ball carriers. And then the other guys, look like options that can be very good outside corners. So we'll see what they add in terms of safeties. I imagine that the safety position is going to be huge for this defense. But we've already seen sort of this good foundation. We've seen the coaches that we already have an idea of, Armando Hawkins coming from Washington is likely going to be the corners coach. We've already seen him make his impact with this group and sort of build what the foundation of that is going to be in terms of specifically their high school related guys.
Yeah. And I think, you talked about how impactful he's been. He's been the guy, I think, so far that's had the biggest impact on the recruiting trail. With those three commitments, he's involved in a lot of the guys that are located in the state of Florida as well. this is a guy that's been all over. And, that Los Angeles area is an area he is definitely familiar with because he did coach at USC. And so going out there, getting these guys that, can sort of form that cornerback room. And I wouldn't be shocked if they add one, maybe two more guys. I mean, again, remember, they are working with 105 scholarships. That number went up this past offseason, or this offseason actually right now that just started. That number went up after there was a ruling in the middle of last season that rosters could be expanded in terms of scholarships. So Carolina's got a lot of things to work with here that could allow them to bring in bigger classes at some of these positions, but love the way that group is starting off. Then you get, after, three-star quarterback Zaid Lott, we mentioned him. Good news with him is that he stayed committed to Carolina, showed some promising things this year at Providence Day School here in Charlotte, took over as the full-time starter and really carried that team for the majority of the season, along with some of the other talent that was on that roster after they got thrown a curveball when Kendra Harrison, the five-star tight end, who, came from Reedsville, transferred there just a few weeks before the season started, and then a couple of weeks into the season transferred back. He was able to navigate them all the way to the state title game, where they would unfortunately fall to Rabun Gap, a team who, as we know, has been one of the better teams in the country the last few years. They played a national schedule, and that's only going to continue with the amount of talent that they have on that roster. So, he had a really solid year for himself. Definitely looks the part of a three-star quarterback. The thing is that Carolina is still looking to potentially recruit over him, especially if they can land a guy like Faison Brandon from in-state. Also, Jared Curtis, another five-star quarterback that they have been in contact with, hoping to get him on campus sometime in April. And then, Brody McWhorter, another guy that has been to campus, has met with Bill Belichick. So there are a lot of different guys that Carolina is still looking to potentially add to that quarterback room alongside of Zaid Lott. You move on to the two unranked guys, and we'll start with Crew Davis. Crew Davis is one of my favorite players in this class, and he will be, I think, when we come back to him at the end of this class. And we're sitting here talking a little under a year from now about this entire class, and we're handing out some of the superlatives and all that stuff like we like to do. This is going to be one of the guys that's going to be really high up there, because don't really understand how he is unranked. He's been playing for the last 2 years. He's been very productive as well. And, look, he is an explosive player, especially in the open field, amazing straight line speed. And you could see how quickly he accelerates to get up to that top speed whenever he gets the football in his hands. Very decisive runner who, picks his holes quickly and hits them hard, which is what you want to see. That's something that Carolina's really focused on with their running backs in recent years. Can create missed tackles by using change of direction, which he can stop on a dime, stop and start on the dime. Also does a really good job of just making guys miss with some of the juke moves in the open field. And also is another guy that can run through tackles. So he sort of uses that combination of speed and power, which allows him to be successful. The best thing about him is how well he catches the ball out of the backfield. Maybe one of the best in this entire class. I mean, a guy that had over 700 receiving yards this past season, very complex route tree, especially for a running back at the high school level. So I think there's a lot of different things that he can do. And this one reminds me a little bit of kind of like what we saw from Will Shipley coming out of high school. Maybe even a more complex route tree, but in terms of the comparisons to a guy like Christian McCaffrey, this is the type of guy that you're getting in Crew Davis. Now, do I think that he is going to be Christian McCaffrey? I can't tell you that. I think that might be a little bit strong, but in terms of what he can do, I think it's a very similar skill set, and that's something that Carolina really hasn't had. Yes, they've had guys that can catch the ball really well out of the backfield, along with what they do running the football. Omarion Hampton, great example of that. This is a guy that if you had to play him at slot receiver, he could have a career in the slot. That's how good he is. That's how complex his route tree is. That's how crisp his routes are. So this is a guy that I think can help Carolina in a multitude of ways and is going to be a really, really great weapon for them moving forward when they get him on campus next year in that 2026 grouping.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, I mean, the first thing that just pops out on the film is his speed and the suddenness with which he goes from sort of a jogging position to a full-on sprint. It, even in some of the clips, it looks like it surprises some of the defenders. So that sort of sticks out first and foremost. Really, really great receiver, like you mentioned. So it could be a very, very good asset in terms of that for this future Tar Heel offense. I think that this is an offense that is going to want to be able to do anything out of a few sets of personnel packages. So they would like to be able to do really anything that they want, from a scheme or play calling aspect out of 12 personnel or 21 personnel. They want to be able to have a big personnel that they feel comfortable running the ball with, but then they want to be able to do different things out of that package. So throwing to tight ends, as we've mentioned, is going to be important. Throwing to slot receivers is going to be important. And then throwing to running backs that can catch the ball and, you know, can be a plus in the pass game are going to be huge components of that, I feel. So there could not be really a better fit that I can think of this guy to what I think that they're going to want this offense to be and how they're going to want that to function. You know, like I mentioned, or like you mentioned, rather, I don't know how he's unranked. It's probably a factor of where he plays and probably a question of the competition that he plays. And that's certainly something to keep in mind. But, you know, when you put it on, speed is speed and you can see it. Obviously, he's going to need some time in a college weight room. There's always, you know, some level of transition to high school run and pass blocking versus, you know, the college level and the athletes you'll see there. But there is a ton to like here, to where, similar to what we mentioned, you know, this is a guy that you can see rising, if not in, you know, the national rankings in 24/7 or On3 or whoever, in the rankings of Tar Heel fans, this is going to be a guy that's high up there leading into the 2026 season, whenever that comes.
Yeah, and of course, he is a lacrosse player as well, that cross-sport athlete that Bill Belichick just loves. He loves going and getting those guys that can play, you know, lacrosse. I think it more has to do with an athleticism thing more than anything. And, you know, you look at, I think you brought up a great point. The reason why he's probably not ranked is because of where he plays. Iona Preparatory School in New Rochelle, New York. It's, again, people do not really take a look at the state of New York when they're looking for football players. So eventually, I think someone's going to get around to him. He will go to one of these camps, you'd imagine, and really show out. So I do think that he is someone who will get recognized here in the near future. One thing that I did want to pass along, his dad actually sent this to me over the weekend. He is a New York State champion in indoor track. Him and his indoor track 4x200 relay team actually won the New York Catholic State Championships. He is the third leg of that group. So congratulations to him. Definitely a guy that I think is worth keeping an eye on over the next year or so as he goes through his senior year of high school and eventually plays some of the other sports as well. The final guy that Carolina has committed in the class, the most recent guy, another unranked player, but a guy that should not be unranked for very, very long, and that is Zion Smith. And this is a big guy, 6'5", 300 pounds. You know, already has the size that he's going to need to play at this level. Now, may need to put on a little bit more size if he's going to play on the interior of the offensive line. But, I mean, look, he has some of the most powerful hands that you're going to see. I mean, immediately when he gets hands on some of these defensive linemen, they are knocked back. Tremendous upper body strength and really shines, as you would expect, in run blocking situations. Just overpowers defenders and has the mean streak that you really like to see from guys that are playing on the interior of the offensive line. And that's something that I think for Carolina, when you look at the offensive linemen, we've seen it lack with some of these guys in years past. When you looked at the offensive lines that really struggled, I think it was because they didn't have guys that were nearly as violent when you watch their film. this is not a guy that you're going to have to worry about that with. Moves pretty well for his size, and certainly capable of being a pull blocker, which Carolina likes to do a lot with their guards. Footwork isn't the greatest, which is why he's probably going to play inside. He plays tackle at the high school level, but that's a big reason why he's probably going to slide inside, but does actually move pretty decently laterally. So that's something that you like to see for him to be able to stay in front of guys if they do get up the field on him just a little bit, and can make him versatile. If Carolina ever needed him to play out there at tackle, that's certainly something where, because of the lateral movement, he might be able to help you out there in a pinch. The biggest thing for him that you really like is that he plays for DeMatha High School up there in the DC area. That is one of the best schools that you can play at in the country. Another team that plays a national schedule. They are, tested very much so in that Washington, D.C. area by schools like Gonzaga, programs that produce power conference talent year in and year out, just like his high school. So I think he's getting the right coaching. And I think it's only a matter of time before he gets discovered as well. Not one of the guys that I think is probably a highlight reel player on his team, but I definitely think he's a guy that Carolina can look at and feel like they've got a really solid building block here on the offensive line to start off this 2026 class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a position that they want to keep adding to, but this is certainly a good start for some of the reasons that you mentioned, mainly the motor, a guy that is going out there looking for contact, that's initiating that. That's something that I think they're placing a premium on along the lines of scrimmage, is just general toughness. And, we can work on your technique, but it is harder to make someone tough than it is to make them technical a lot of the time. So I think that's sort of something that they're, harping on there. And then, playing at DeMatha Catholic there in sort of the DMV area, as they call it, DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia, that is a very competitive area. And DeMatha is one of the, top high schools in that area. Like you mentioned, they play a national schedule. So this is a high school program that is probably more equipped than a lot of others to prepare you for that transition, to the college game. They're going to run, more sophisticated strength and conditioning there. They're going to have you more ready from sort of balancing life versus football than it would be at other high schools necessarily. So I think those are two pluses in his favor of this is a guy that's likely going to come in with a leg up in that regard. We'll be able to spend more time working on that technique, and we already have the basis of physicality to work with. So I think it's a good addition, obviously a position that they're going to want to keep building on for this team. I mean, we saw what they took in the transfer portal. This is a position group overall on the roster that they want to continue to mold and, recreate in their image. But I think a very, very good start for 2026, all things considered.
Yeah. And, that when you look at where the class ranks currently, and this is when we say that guys are unranked, this is why we say that, is because when you go to 24/7 Sports, you go to the composite rankings, that's what we're looking at. Because if you look at Crew Davis, he's a guy that's ranked by 24/7 itself, but not across the board. That means either Rivals or ESPN does not have him ranked. Same thing with Zion Smith. And so Carolina currently sits 31st in that recruiting cycle, which is, a really solid spot, I think, to be at early on, especially, you look at some of the other schools that are around them. The only school that has less commits that are in front of them, if you look at the ACC standings, where Carolina is 6th, is SMU. They have 4 commits, and they are slightly ahead of where Carolina is at. Everybody else on this list ahead of them in the conference has either 6 commits in their class or 9 commits in their class. So Carolina, they've got some decent talent already. You would feel like that's going to grow. I think eventually, a guy like Crew Davis, probably a high-end 3-star, probably the same thing for Zion Smith. So eventually that will help them out. But really, I like where Carolina's at right now, and I think they have taken care of some key areas. Would definitely like to see a defensive lineman added here sooner rather than later, because I do still think that's the biggest area of need for Carolina. But that sort of leads us into our most wanted for this year. We're not going to make you wait any longer. We do it every single year whenever we officially turn the calendar from the 2025 season or from the one recruiting class to the next. And this time we're doing it with the 2025 recruiting cycle, turning the page officially to 2026. And so we're going to go 10-1 here, telling you back and forth who we have on our list here. And I'll start out right here at number 10. I'll go with the 4-star offensive tackle from Loudoun County High School in Leesburg, Virginia. That would be offensive tackle Carter Scruggs. He is a guy that, when I watched him on film, loved everything about him. Mauler in the run game. That's something you're going to see with a lot of the guys that Carolina is going after when it comes to offensive tackles. They're looking for guys that are going to be able to win in that area of the game. And he consistently just knocking guys down to the ground. Love the hand placement that he has, and love the way that he just drives off the football. Great footwork, I think, especially for someone that is a junior in high school. I think it allows him to be in a really good spot when it comes to pass protection, as does his strong lateral movement. I think he does a great job of staying in front of even faster edge rushers, and that's what you want to see from guys at this level. You're looking for guys that have the foot speed to stay in front of faster guys that are coming around the edge. He does a great job of that, and I think he has really good balance, isn't lunging to try to get his hands on somebody. Love everything about his game in terms of the run game and pass protection. And, of course, as I mentioned with Zion Smith, plays with a mean streak. He is out there to knock you to the ground immediately off the snap of the football. And that's the main thing that you want to see from these guys, is that they've got a little bit of that violence inside that comes out whenever they are, playing, especially in run blocking situations. That's when you definitely want to see that mean streak come out. You see it with that. You see him throwing guys to the ground in pass protection. So love everything about him. That's why I have him at number 10, the 4-star offensive tackle, Carter Scruggs.
Yeah, starting in a similar vein, I also had an offensive lineman at number 10, generally in the same area, another guy that's local, but out of East Forsyth High School in Kernersville, North Carolina. I had offensive tackle J.B. Shabazz. A lot of my list is going to be pretty local, just to throw that out there at the beginning, though I do think that they're going to be, more national overall. This is a great year for local talent. So I think just based on that, they're going to do what they can. We'll see where the chips fall. But to start out with JB Shabazz, a guy that was tall, has a really good frame, I think has a general idea of how to use it at this point, is a 2-sport athlete. So you do see a lot of that athleticism there. So there's a lot of like in terms of his upside overall. Obviously was the left tackle for Bryce Baker last year at East Forsyth, so you have that connection. So I think that sort of chemistry could be a pretty good asset if this is a situation that, North Carolina potentially gets his commitment sometime in the future over the next year. I still think that he has some things to learn in terms of the specifics of technique and just, figuring out how to be the best version of himself that he can be right now. It's sort of leaning on that athleticism, but that's not uncommon for high school tape. So I think that the potential is very sky high. I know that this is going to be, a national recruitment. There's going to be multiple sort of big name or blue chip players in the mix, but I think if North Carolina is able to get this commitment, it would be a very good addition, maybe not in year 1, but year 2, 3, and beyond. I think that this could be a very solid piece that they could potentially end up getting.
Yeah, Scruggs, I think, would probably fit in that same narrative as well. You move on to number 9. I have Cortez Redding, the 4-star safety from Jonesboro High School in Jonesboro, Georgia. Very versatile player, a guy that can play either at the nickelback spot or either of the safety spots. I personally love him as a deep safety. Has really nice burst, which can allow him to explode out of breaks and make plays on the football. That's really the main thing that you want to see from your safeties, really are just guys that when they have a chance to break on the football, they're being aggressive and really being able to play the football to knock it down and create some of those pass breakups that Carolina's really been missing the last few years. Tremendous in one-on-one situations. That's the reason why he could succeed as a nickelback. But that's the thing. It's going to allow Carolina to be a little bit more aggressive if they land a guy like him because, hey, you can ask one of your safeties, I need you to come down in the box and I need you to play one-on-one against a slot receiver. He is more than capable of doing that and doing that at a really high level. And then the other thing that you really like, and the reason why I would play him at that field safety role is he does a great job as a deep safety of rolling over the top and helping in coverage. It's something that's really been missing for Carolina over the last few years. Their safeties have really just been so poor at being able to do that, knowing where they have to be in order to make plays, providing some help over the top for some of these corners, especially guys that are a little bit smaller. This is a guy that I think will work perfectly for Carolina in their defense if they can bring him in. They've got some stiff competition to do it, but as I mentioned, he is the perfect fit for that field safety spot, and that's why I have him at number 9.
Yeah, at number 9, I have another lineman. This one on the defensive side out of Weddington and Matthews, North Carolina. One of a pair of what looks to be brothers or twins, actually, but I have Aiden Harris, sort of the defensive end. They're a guy another one that's going to be a national recruitment with schools like, Auburn and Ohio State heavily involved. But this is a guy that to me looks like a future defensive end all the way. Probably not an edge, a guy that's going to gain weight in college and play sort of in that strong side defensive end role. I think he has great bend, great athleticism. He looks like a guy that can sort of fill both of those defensive end roles of both rushing the passer and setting that edge. I think that in the past, North Carolina has gotten guys with this athleticism. We haven't always seen them live up to their potential, but obviously this is a position where you have to keep swinging for those guys that have sort of that rare either body style or, just raw talent, athleticism, whatever you want to call it, to be able to play this position. So for me, that's my number 9. Obviously, it's a long shot to some extreme or to some extent there, but it's a local guy. It's a guy that, this new staff should be able to get on campus at least at some point. And, it's a guy that they'll at least have somewhat of a shot with here in the spring and summer prior to some sort of commitment.
Yeah, I go at number 8 with 4-star running back Deshaun Rideau, who is out of Oaks Christian High School in Westlake Village, California. So I go back out to the West Coast. And, look, Crew Davis, heck of a player, really like him. This is more of your traditional style of running back. And, one thing that Carolina's been looking for in the last few years when they have gone into the high school ranks to get a running back, they have looked for guys that bring a nice edge when they run. That's exactly what Rideau does. He's not afraid to run through defenders. But the good news is that's not even really the strength of his game. It's there. He'll use it when he has to, and it's definitely very effective. But this is a guy that also really just has outstanding bursts and acceleration. Another guy, I think that's one of the things that this staff is really looking for, are guys that are incredibly quick, that can get to that top speed very quickly. And that's exactly what he does. When he picks the right hole, and can break out into the open field, that he goes from 0 to 100 incredibly fast. And that's what makes it different. It's one thing to have really good straight line speed, but if it takes you a little bit of time to get there, it's not nearly as effective. When you can really do a great job of turning it on and just racing away from those defenders near the line of scrimmage, it makes such a huge difference. And I feel like that's what you see constantly with Rideau that allows him to hit some of those home run plays. Also does a really good job of making defenders miss in the open field. Real suddenness that he runs with, does a good job of stopping and starting, just creates those missed tackles in the open field. Even if it isn't with him running through guys, he finds ways to keep the plays alive. And so I think he would be a perfect fit in this backfield alongside of what Crew Davis brings for you, and that's why I have him at number 8 on my list.
Yeah, number 8, I have another lineman, this one back on the offensive side, listed as an interior offensive lineman, but I see him as a guy that can play both tackle and guard. This is a guy out of Calvary Christian there in Clearwater, Florida, and Michael Ionata. Plays a little bit of both at the high school level, so has that background, has that flexibility to go on multiple spots on the offensive line. So it could be a good potential addition from that aspect of sort of a flexible piece that you can figure into different spots. I know that's something that, offensive line coaches like to speak of guys that have that versatility so that they can get the best 5 out there. So I think that's something in his favor. Listed at about 6'5", 6'6", 300 pounds. So sort of can go either way there. Either you have sort of an average, tackle size guy, or you have a bigger guard, which no one's ever going to complain about that. But, a guy that really just plays very technically sound at this level at the moment. He finishes his blocks. He has quick feet. He is decisive with where he's going and really just brings a good background. Probably not an early contributor in terms of, strength. I think he'll need some strength and conditioning work at the college level to sort of fill out what he's going to be ultimately. But similar to JB Sabaz, you see a lot of that sort of raw material there that you can really work with. He's got a good basis to work off of, and he's got the motor and sort of right attitude that you can see in his play that I feel will take him a long way at the college level whenever he gets there.
All right, we move on to number 7. I have 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis from Nashville Christian School in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, you talk about a long shot. Carolina, I think, going to have to do a lot of work here. They were not even inside of his top 6 that he released back a few weeks ago. But one thing that did happen right after he ended up releasing that top 6, Carolina does an in-home visit with him. He says that he's going to be taking a visit to campus. Now, it won't be an official visit as far as I know, but he is going to be there in April. And then hopefully Carolina can convince him to schedule an official visit to Chapel Hill then. If they could do it, it'd be huge because this is a guy with outstanding arm strength. I mean, effortless arm strength. When you talk about a guy that just makes it look so easy to throw the ball deep down the field, that's what you see with him. And the weird thing about it is that he is a great off-platform thrower. There are times that you almost wonder if he gets outside the pocket just a little bit too much. But I think that's something that can be corrected. And the good news is that when he is off-platform, he throws about as good as anybody in the entire country. He is not a guy that's messed up by not having his feet set. There are guys that, when their feet aren't set, means that the arm strength, the accuracy isn't there. That's not it for him. Clearly, you would like him to be a guy that focuses on keeping his feet on the ground, being able to drive throws, but he's definitely a guy that has all the arm talent that you need. As I mentioned, tremendous accuracy. I think, definitely some of the plays, especially when he's in the pocket, the accuracy is outstanding, and he does a great job with the touch that he puts on the football to his guys, whether it's in the intermediate passing game or the deep passing game. The other area where he really shines is he is a very effective runner of the football. That's something that I don't think, when you first turn on the film, you're really expecting from him, because you see him throwing the football a lot early on in his highlight tape. And then all of a sudden he starts to show you that running ability. And I think he really surprises you with just how good of a runner he is and how many yards he can pile up in the running game. I think he is an all-around great quarterback, although he is not the best quarterback, in my opinion, in this class. But I still think he is definitely worth his 5-star rating, and it's why I have him at number 7.
Yeah, at number 7, I have yet again another lineman, which is going to be a recurring theme, at least in this early section, if you can sort of tell where my mind is in terms of where they need to hit in this recruiting class. But another in-state offensive lineman, this time out of Providence Day School there in Charlotte, in Leo Delaney. Another guy that is a teammate of what looks to be a future Tar Heel quarterback in Zayd Lott that we mentioned sort of at the beginning of the show. But another guy similar to Michael Ionata that, listed as an interior offensive lineman, at least in terms of the recruiting rankings, but has sort of that versatility, has experience in both. So another flexible piece there on the offensive line. Another guy that has very good feet, that has a high motor, not the, the most physically aggressive guy that you're going to see anywhere, but certainly has that right mentality that he is coming to the position with. So similar to Ionata that I mentioned previously, these are guys that you can put at different positions. You can put them at one of the tackle spots. You can put them at left guard, to complement what you already have there at the position, and see what those other pieces are that you can bring in to really fill out this whole offensive line group. I'm looking for a 3, 4, 5 potentially here in this class, depending on the guys that they have that they got out of the portal and how those sort of fill out. Like you mentioned previously, they're now working with 105 scholarships, as the ACC has not put any limit on those. So this, as well as the defensive line, is a room that they want to have the depth that not only so that they can practice and not worry about injuries, but that they can potentially rotate and keep guys fresh. So I think similar to the other guys that I mentioned in Sabaz and Ionata, Leo Delaney, a guy that's going to be in national recruitment, but would be a great addition to this offensive line room if they were able to land his commitment.
At number 6, I go to the wide receiver spot. Walker Bryson, the 4-star wideout from Rabun Gap High School in Rabun Gap, Georgia. This is the definition of a Bill Belichick type guy. Whenever you see the meme of Belichick with the binoculars, this could be a guy that fits that description perfectly. Now, he doesn't play lacrosse as far as I know. He might, and if he does, that would almost completely seal the deal. But when you talk about a slot receiver, this is the exact guy that you will love. I remember watching him last year when I watched Rabun Gap play the Baylor School on national television, and when I was looking at Marshall Pritchett, who was committed to Carolina at the time, of course, now committed and playing for Alabama. And every time I would see the numbers, of course, very similar, 8 and 2. It's a little bit difficult sometimes because they had gold numbers on the back of their jersey to tell who's who. My eyes kept going to Walker Bryson a lot. And then I'd have to realize, was watching the wrong guy there. Let me rewind, go back and watch Pritchett. Walker Bryson really is a tremendous player. I mean, the thing that you like the most about him is his ability to make guys miss in the open field. Once he catches the football, it is almost impossible to bring this guy down. I mean, there are multiple clips. I mean, you watch the first half of his highlight tape from his junior year. I mean, he makes 3, 4 guys miss, it feels like, on almost every play. That shiftiness, that ability to get away from defenders is incredibly valuable, especially for a guy that's going to be playing the slot receiver spot. The thing I really like, too, incredibly reliable hands. Anytime that he was targeted in that game against the Baylor School, he came up with the reception. And he was the go-to guy on very important downs. Yes, there were a couple of times they went Pritchett's way as well, but Bryson was that other guy that they were going to consistently over and over again. We have a big play. We need to get it into your hands. And he makes just about every catch. The other thing that you really like, and especially for a slot receiver, you want to see guys that run really good routes. That's exactly what you get from Walker Bryson. He is a guy that has a very complex route tree, but is also very crisp the way that he runs his routes. Runs them hard. It's what allows defenders to bite and allows him to get open. Something that we've seen from guys like Ryan Switzer. The guy that I think was the best at it was Josh Downs. And I think Walker Bryson, just looking at a guy that's a high school junior, has the capabilities of being that. I think he is the all-around receiver. And yes, Carolina's got some guys that they brought in this past recruiting class at the slot spot. They do still have Javarius Green, a guy that they like. But that's going to be a position that's going to be open more than likely after this season, because that's a spot where, this year maybe Kobe Paysor holds it down. If not, even if there is a guy that steps up and holds down that position for this year, bringing in a guy like Walker Bryson could sort of change some of those things up. I love everything about him as a receiver, and I think he is the perfect fit for me at number 6 on my list.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have to go at my number 6 spot with another previous commit. This one on the defensive side of the ball, an edge defender, Xavier Griffin Haynes, out of Rollsville High School in Rollsville, North Carolina. It's certainly hard to get guys that decommit back into the fold, but with a guy like this, you have to keep trying until the end. Could potentially play the sort of edge spot or defensive end, however you want to place him. He could be on either side of your defensive line of scrimmage. He's sort of that prototypical edge that you look for. 6'6", very tall and lean, 235, so he has good weight on him. Really understands how to play the position and play it from a multifaceted role. Obviously can rush the passer, but he's a guy that understands, how to drop into coverage into the flat, how to, create turnovers, whether it's fumbles, interceptions, anything along those lines, and is really there to make the little plays alongside the big plays, which I really admire. That's something that stands out from his film specifically, as a guy that just is a football player and is a guy that is excited to play the game of football, wants to play it in every facet, wants his team to win. So that's something that you notice. That's a big plus for me, alongside sort of the obvious traits that just pop out from, a guy that is a first off the bus kind of guy, or could be that kind of guy in this class.
All right, number 5, I go to the offensive line. 4-star offensive tackle Pierre Dean out of West Forsyth High School in Clemens, North Carolina. One thing that is notable about him is he is a little bit of a thinner offensive lineman, but I do think that when you turn on the film and you watch the way that he plays, you feel pretty confident about him being a little bit thinner, adding a little bit of weight to that frame, and still having all of the things that you need. I put it, one first thing that stuck out to me was just how good he is in the run game. And he is, again, one of those guys that I classify as a mauler, because he does a great job of stacking up pancake block after pancake block in the run game. It's more of a technical job that he does, being able to knock guys down to the ground. Definitely does a lot of it with leverage and everything like that. But the thing that I like is that it's consistent. You see it all the time on his film. And he is a guy that, is just so impactful, even at a smaller size. So, I think the violent streak is definitely there. I just don't know if he has the size currently at the high school level to be able to show it the way that some of these other guys do. And I think all you have to do, add a little bit of weight, and that will show up there. He finishes every block. That's one thing that you really like, is that guys play to the whistle. They don't let up. That's very important, especially if there is a guy that's, changing sides of the field. If your running back is changing sides of the field, even if it's a run that's away from you, he makes sure that he finishes every single block. And I love that element about guys. It shows that they have a high motor along the offensive line. Good lateral movement, which I think shows you he's a really good pass protector. That was one thing that stuck out. You didn't see it a lot on his film, of a team that ran the football a ton, but also when they did throw the ball, he does a really good job of dropping and moving laterally and being able to protect the quarterback. Faster offensive lineman, not going to be an issue for him. And that's one of the reasons that you like maybe the size that he brings. That's why you probably don't want him to be too big of an offensive lineman. So I think you see all the tools in both the run and pass game for him. And then versatility. He's a guy that can play either left or right tackle. And I don't think people know just how important that is for an offensive lineman, because there are some guys that are locked into playing on the left side of the line or locked into the right side, which means that it's their strong side. If they were to try to go in the other direction, they would get blown by because they just don't work on that side of the offensive line. They don't work on their footwork on that side, on their hand placement on that side. He is someone that can really do a great job on either side, play both sides this year as a junior, and we'll see where he ends up playing as a senior. But I love everything about Pierre Dean, and that's why he is number 5 on my list.
Yeah, and we've been all over the place in our list thus far, so we've actually come to the point where there's sort of some overlap. So much so that I also had, PJ Dean in the number 5 spot. So we'll try not to repeat too much, but we'll just echo some of that. He's a guy that plays at a physical level despite his size. But the main thing, like you mentioned, is that he is technically sound and he is decisive. So he's one of those guys that, to term a phrase that is used generally among coaches and then amongst Coach Belichick specifically, he's a guy that comes in and does his job. And I think that's going to be somewhat of a building block mentality for, what this program is going to be over the next few years, of guys coming in and doing what's asked of them. And, if you can go above and beyond, great, but, doing what is required of you, following whatever that process is, and, not getting outside of those bounds in one way or the other. And I think this is a guy that, that lives that out in his play, and you see it on the film. It's very obvious why he has the rank that he has. Obviously, is a high 4-star at some places, is closing in on that 5-star range. So this is a guy that, is highly sought after, I think, for that reason, in spite of his size. So I think it's a guy that North Carolina is gonna be in very heavily here. I think it's one that they would really, really like to have. And I think that if they get a guy like Pierre Dean, he's a guy that could be a tone setter in that locker room very early on.
Yeah, and for number 4, I've got 4-star defensive lineman Noah Clark from C.E. Jordan High School in Durham, North Carolina. This is what Carolina has been looking for a while. You have needed a run stopper, and you got it a little bit this year at times with Travis Shaw, but it wasn't overly consistent. This is the dude that you want, because that is basically his entire game. He is not going to be able to rush the passer all that much, but he does everything that you need to do to be able to stop the run. It starts with the fact that he's got incredibly powerful hands. The minute that he hits an offensive lineman, that guy is being knocked back. Now, there are some offensive linemen that can withstand that, but it is very, very rare, and he does a great job of immediately getting leverage at the line of scrimmage. He also plays with the violent streak that allows him to shed those blockers very, very easily and get into that backfield to be able to make plays. So I really like everything that I see about him. And again, the definition of a run stopper, a guy that, that's his main focus. That's where he shines, and he knows it. And I think it really, pays dividends for him and for his high school when it comes to being able to stop that area of the game. I'd like to see him add a little bit more, in terms of being able to get after the quarterback. But heck, if you're the guy that can find a way to help this team stop the run better consistently year in and year out, it's hard not to love a guy like that. And that's why I got him number 4 on my list.
Yeah, number 4, go on the offensive side of the ball. Another guy that is in-state guy, and another guy from a high school we've already touched there at Providence Day. I have the wide receiver Gordon Sellers, one of the top targets for Zayd Lot there, and a guy that I think could be a nice complement to sort of what we've looked at from the wide receiver position thus far in terms of their additions. They've looked at slot guys. Obviously, there'll be other slot guys, like you mentioned, that will be not only heavily featured on the field this upcoming season, but are, guys that they're going after to fill those slots. But they are going to need players on the outside to be sort of those possession receivers, the guys that go up and make catches, get 50-50 balls, or turn 50-50 balls into 80-20 balls, as they say. And Gordon Sellers sort of fits that role, I think, to a T. 6'2", 180, so very, very good size that you like. Not a huge guy, but a guy that plays with a huge catch radius, has very long arms, has very long legs as well. So, has these sort of big strides that, he can clear a lot of space in a short period of time. He's a guy that I think is made for the play action passing game of just either, go routes, posts, things like that. You throw it up, and more often than not, this is a guy that's going to come down with the football and catch it soundly, for big yards and touchdowns. So to sort of fill out that other role of your outside receiver, your vertical option, I think that there's a good chance that that's Gordon Sellers in this class.
All right, at number 3, I've got 5-star quarterback Faison Brandon. I mentioned him earlier. He is the star in the state of North Carolina at a Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina. This guy, legitimately the top quarterback in this class. I think you look at the arm strength that he brings, and I said effortless for Jared Curtis. It's the same thing for Brandon. I think he's a guy that can compete with just about anybody when it comes to throwing it down the field. And the good thing is that, yeah, the arm strength itself is there because we saw it with a guy like Jacoby Criswell, but the accuracy is there. And the thing is that accuracy, that touch that he has on the football, it is at all 3 levels. He does a great job of leading his receivers. Most of those passes are out in front. I mean, it's exactly what you want to see from a star quarterback. Love his footwork. It's not sloppy. He does a good job of stepping into throws, driving them down the field. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see a guy whose feet are all over the place, who's dancing around in the pocket. You don't see that at all with him. Very calm demeanor when he's in the pocket. And then the thing is when he escapes the pocket, he can get out and make plays with his legs. And that is not only, plays by being able to run the football, which he does. The numbers in terms of the rushing yards and everything like that, pretty high. But it's just the easiness with which he runs as well. That seems to be, so impressive. But also, a guy that when he gets outside of the pocket, he can extend plays with his legs and allow some of those routes to open up, some of those secondary routes down the field. If the first initial play sort of breaks down, those are the things that you like to see. And that's why I really like him as a prospect. I know he's committed to Tennessee. I know he says he's 1,000% committed there and he's not going anywhere. This is still a guy that Carolina has to push to try to flip until the very end, because this is very similar to, Sam Howell, Drake May with him and Bryce Baker. Bryce Baker might be the Sam Howell. He might be the guy. I mean, we're thinking he could come in and potentially start this year. Brandon might be the guy that you bring in after him, redshirt for a year, but then he becomes your guy eventually down the line. That might be the thinking behind what Carolina ends up doing if they can land him in this class. And I'd love to see it because I think that he has all the skills, and that's why I've got him number 3.
Yeah, at number 3, I have now a tight end we finally mentioned here, which we think are going to be pretty important. But a guy that I think North Carolina is in a really good position for right now has already scheduled an official visit out of Mount Zion High School in Mount Zion, Illinois. Tight end J.C. Anderson, listed at 6'6", 230. He has a really, really good frame and build for what you want to see from the tight end position. Very, very tall, so he's comfortable going up and getting the ball vertically, moves very comfortable for that size, isn't sort of awkward or has any issues there or stiff. From what you look at with his film, there's not a ton that you see of him as an interior blocker, though I think that is something that he can eventually do. It just doesn't show up on film. But when he's in space, he's a guy that's running guys over or, lowering the shoulder and getting that extra yard or two after contact once a tackler is engaged with him. So I really, really like what he could be from whatever the tight end role ends up being. And I think that this is an offense based on what we've seen from, Belichick offenses in the past. It's going to feature its tight ends heavily. I think that's something that they're going to try to do as best they can this fall. And I think that could really pay dividends for this guy that sort of looks like the potential next option in sort of that Belichick line of using tight ends as really, really effective offensive weapons.
All right, at number 2, I go down to the state of Florida, and I go to IMG Academy to go after 4-star edge rusher Jake Creel. This is a guy that, look, Carolina wants to get more involved with IMG. We saw they landed in the top 10 for A.J. Marks, another player that Carolina should definitely be looking at in this class on the defensive side of the ball. Creel might be the best player in this class just based off of what I saw. outstanding speed off the edge. I mean, just tremendous. Blows right by some of the better offensive tackles that you're going to see in the entire country. Tremendous job of shedding blocks, and he does it with a combination of physicality and suddenness. The way that he's able to beat tackles across their face and to the inside is something you don't really see a whole lot of at the high school level. And when you combine it with the speed and burst that he has, it's almost impossible to stay in front of him. He does a great job of mixing in the technical and bull rush moves, can really do either, despite being a guy that has a relatively small frame. And so I think you look at the way that he plays, he is an animal off the edge. And that's what Carolina needs. They need guys that can get after the quarterback consistently, can find ways to get off of blocks and be able to make those havoc plays in the backfield. That's exactly what Crayola can do. And I think that this is one where you need to sort of utilize a guy like Billy Miller, who's on your staff, who was his head coach last year. You need to try to do everything you possibly can to land his commitment, because that would be a game changer for you off the edge. And that's why I've got him at number 2 on my list.
Yeah, number 2, I have really the second in a pair that we mentioned earlier. I mentioned Aiden Harris. Now we'll go with Andrew or Drew Harris, also out of Weddington there in Matthews, North Carolina. Listed as a defensive lineman, but looks to be more of an edge guy at the moment. But to me, just with his height and weight, he's a little bit on the shorter side, not super long, but you do see him play in space a little bit. He sort of screams a future hybrid linebacker guy, which has been a role that has had success in Belichick defenses, a linebacker, an inside linebacker that can come down and rush the passer, or an edge that can sort of play in a coverage position, really more of a versatile guy in that position and in that role, I think can have a lot of success. Drew Harris is a guy that's quick. He is relentless to the football, very good at getting tackles for loss, very good at, shedding the football and getting his guy on the ground. So I think that is an aspect of this defense that they're really going to want to emphasize, or are those guys that just go out there and make plays and put offenses in bad positions. And I think right now, in terms of the crop of guys that they have that they're recruiting, Drew Harris is one of the best at doing that. And I think probably a little bit more obtainable than his brother at the moment in terms of their recruitment. So I think he could be a really good position, a really good guy at that position that they could get to add to their defense in the future, and just have another puzzle piece to fit in there and say, hey, go turn a 1st and 10 into a 2nd and 13 for us, and get that consistently. I think that's going to be really valuable to what this defense wants to do.
All right, and number 1 on my list, it's amazing because you just talked about one of the Harris twins. I've got the other one. I've got Aiden Harris as my top guy. I think that he is exactly what Carolina is looking for at the position. I guess you could call it a defensive end, because I think Carolina is basically going to have 3 guys that are down on the offensive line, and then 2 potential edge rushers that Carolina will be utilizing in most situations. This is the type of guy that fits the role that Javari Ritzie was supposed to play at Carolina. He's a guy that can get after the quarterback as a, hybrid defensive end, defensive tackle type player. I think that he is tremendous when it comes to his use of technical pass rush moves, utilizes the swim move very well, and guys really can't compete with it. I think, the thing that you love that puts him in a great spot, and the reason why those technical pass rush moves are so effective is he has great burst off the line of scrimmage. I mean, immediately, right off the snap, he is in your face and getting past you if you're an offensive lineman. It's so hard to stay in front of him. Plays with the physical edge that he needs to win inside, which is what you need to do against some of these guards that he could potentially face. And then, I think he has outstanding speed. And again, something that I've talked about so much with a lot of the guys that Carolina's landed here since Belichick, took the job and started recruiting, the motor. I mean, he is a guy that's running down plays from behind. He's, getting down the field because, all of a sudden a player has broken out of the backfield. He's charging these guys down in the open field. So I love everything about him. I think he's just a tenacious player that can, do a good job of helping Carolina in the run, can get after the quarterback from, sort of an interior defensive line spot, which is something that Carolina just hasn't been able to do consistently throughout the last few years. You mentioned it's going to be a little bit tough to land his commitment because there are some schools that have established really good connections with him already. But I will say, you go back, you look at when Bill Belichick went to, where he made his first stops once he got out on the recruiting trail. The first spot that he ended up was at Weddington High School. And that really started, him going around the Charlotte area that day. But that was the first school that he went to. And I get it, man. They've got some really talented guys across the board there. But I don't think it's a coincidence that he went there first. I think that he looked at the Harris twins, thought they were incredibly valuable, would love to get a guy like Thomas Davis Jr., who's committed to Notre Dame currently. So that shows you that with him committed there, clearly not, tied to Georgia where his dad went, he's definitely open. I think that Carolina is going to focus heavily on Weddington High School. And I do believe that Aiden Harris is that main guy that they're going to focus on. And that would be my main focus as well. That's why I got him atop my list.
Yeah, number one, I have a interior defensive lineman. You mentioned one earlier, and Noah Clark. I'll go with another one that's an in-state guy, and Ben Bolware out of Oak Grove High School there in Winston-Salem. 6'5", 305, so could potentially gain weight to be more of that nose guard type role, but could also be sort of that three technique or rush defensive tackle. When you put on the film, you see a guy that, similar to Clark, is one of these guys that fills up the interior, sort of turns those lanes small very quickly, requires multiple blockers to engage with, so frees up other guys on your defensive line to rush the passer. But similar to what you mentioned with Clark, either one of these guys are guys that they desperately need in this defense to really make everything else work. They need consistently from that interior, as we've heard from Coach Belichick, as we've heard from the new general manager, Michael Lombardi. This is a football program that wants to build itself inside out, and that's going to start mainly on the defensive line due to the defensive makeup of the head coach. And so that's going to start with your nose guard and defensive tackle position. So I think that that might be the most important position in this group alongside offensive line, is getting that interior of the defensive line with guys that you feel really, really solid about. And I think that, similar to Clark that you mentioned, Ben Bolware could really be one of those options as well.
All right, so let's run through our list just again really quickly here, 10-1. Number 10, Carter Scruggs, the four-star offensive tackle from Loudoun County in Leesburg, Virginia. At number 9, four-star safety Cortez Redding out of Jonesboro High School in Jonesboro, Georgia. At number 8, four-star running back Deshaun Rideau out of Oaks Christian High School in Westlake Village, California. At number 7, 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis from Nashville Christian High School in Nashville, Tennessee. At number 6, 4-star wide receiver Walker Bryson from Rabun Gap Nachuchi High School in Rabun Gap, Georgia. Number 5, 4-star offensive tackle Pierre Dean from West Forsyth High School in Clemens, North Carolina. At 4, 4-star defensive lineman Noah Clark out of C.E. Jordan High School in Durham, North Carolina. At number 3, 5-star quarterback Faison Brandon from Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina. At number 2, 4-star edge rusher Jake Creel from IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. And at number 1, 4-star defensive lineman Aiden Harris from Weddington High School in Weddington, North Carolina.
And on my list, I had number 10, offensive tackle J.B. Sabaz out of East Forsyth High School there in Kernersville, North Carolina. Number 9 had Aiden Harris out of Weddington High School in Matthews, defensive end. Number 8, another offensive lineman, and just offensive lineman, Michael Ionata, could play inside or out. Michael is out of Calvary Christian High School in Clearwater, Florida. At number 7, had another offensive lineman, another versatile guy in Leo Delaney out of Providence State School there in Charlotte. at number 6, I had former commitment edge defender Xavion Griffin Hayes, who is out of Rollsville High School there in Rollsville, North Carolina at number 5. I also had Pierre Dean from West Forsyth there in Clemens. Number 4 had wide receiver out of Providence State in Charlotte in Gordon Sellers. Number 3 for me was tight end J.C. Anderson. He's out of Mount Zion High School in Mount Zion, Illinois. Number 2 had Drew Harris, another part of that duo out of Weddington High School in Matthews. And then at number 1 had the defensive tackle Ben Boulware out of Oak Grove High School there in Winston-Salem.
All right, guys. So there's your look at the 10 most wanted prospects for us. A little breakdown of those guys in the 2026 class. For more, head over to the website, heeltoughblog.com. I've got my top 20 guys in this class posted up there. So 10 more guys that I really want for Carolina. Go check that out right now. Find out who just missed out on my top 10 list. Again, it's over there at heeltoughblog.com. All right, a couple other news and notes here before we get out of this edition of the podcast. You do have 2026 three-star safety Devarius Surratt, a guy out of Crest High School up there in Shelby, North Carolina. He has set his official visit to campus. It will be the weekend of April 11th. He will be one of the first guys on campus for an official visit under new head coach Bill Belichick. That'll be a weekend you would imagine Carolina will add a few more names to before it is all said and done. Surratt also with scheduled visits officially to NC State, Duke, and Virginia Tech in that order to start out the month of June. So we'll see if Carolina is able to convince him enough there in April to potentially get him to cancel those visits that he has scheduled in June. The Tar Heels land in the top 3 for 2026 interior offensive lineman Anthony Big U-Haul Hall. That is the nickname that he has given himself. I don't know if that's from him or if one of his coaches gave him that. That's the one that is on his Twitter account, and he is tremendous. A guy with some tremendous size. Carolina battling for him in the final 3. So coming down the stretch for him, Tar Heels land in the top 6 for 2026 4-star defensive lineman Vodney Cleveland. That's another guy that Carolina got in on at the end of January and now is in his group final 6 remaining there out of the state of Alabama. Tar Heels one of 7 remaining for 2026 3-star offensive tackle Merlin Bright out of the state of Florida. And then Carolina also one of the top 10 remaining for 2026 unranked cornerback AJ Marks. He released a top 10. Of course, he is out of IMG Academy, and that would be a big addition for Carolina as well. One other note, Carolina, one of the teams that 4-star running back Messiah Mickens is, in his words, quote, exploring after his running backs coach Jawan Sider left Penn State. Sider did go over to Notre Dame. That is one of the schools that he is exploring along with Carolina, but was interesting to see his name come up there. Carolina, as I mentioned, with a commitment already in that class, but Mickens, a guy out of the state of Pennsylvania. That's an area that Carolina is trying to get into. We've seen a few offers in that state already, so it'll be interesting to see if they are able to push for Mickens and potentially be one of the teams in the mix to land him if he does end up decommitting from Penn State. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Guys, make sure you head over to the website, heeltoughblog.com. Check out everything that we've got going on right there. As I mentioned, that top 20 prospects, in terms of the guys that I want the most, that's up there for you guys to be able to check out. All of the news that we just talked about on the recruiting trail will be up there, and any other news that comes out around the football program here in the coming weeks, we will have that up there for you guys as we are entering, a quieter period here before Carolina gets cranked up for spring ball, the first under new head coach Bill Belichick. Also, want to encourage you guys to check out the basketball coverage on the website over there. Carolina, know they're struggling through this season, but incredibly important games coming up here for Carolina down the stretch of the regular season. They've got to find a way to put together a win streak here. before they play that game against Duke. If they can do that, they at least have a shot to still make the NCAA tournament. We're going to have you covered no matter what happens on the website at HeelToughBlog.com with Josh taking you through the entire season. And then over on the Four Corners podcast side of things, me and him breaking down every game for you, as well as any other storylines around Carolina basketball, such as the potential GM hire. We have had you covered with all of that, as well as the potential new location for a new arena for Carolina. We also had you covered on that. So go back, check out those episodes, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Same thing if you are a listener here to the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Also want to encourage you guys to go to the Facebook and Twitter pages. Facebook, when you get there, make sure you like that page. That'll let you know whenever we go live with videos so that you don't miss any of those. Or if you just want to do it on Twitter, that's also a great place to do it. That you can go on there, follow the Twitter account at Heel Tough Blog, and then just turn on those notifications. So anytime that we post an article, anytime that we go live and we retweet it, any of that stuff, it will be there will be a notification that will come to you to let you know that we have tweeted something out. So that is the best way to do it. Or just check the website morning, afternoon, and evening. Make that a habit of yours so that you don't miss any of the latest news around Tar Heel football and basketball. So once again, that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Zack for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.